Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. Today, I'm Chamberlain. So.
Yes, indeed. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Good morning and welcome to this day, the 6th day in the month of January 2022. It's a Friday morning. The first.
So you have to like, oh, 6th, okay, you have to be sure, huh?
Well, it's always better. The last time you checked your calendar like that, Chamberlain, was in primary school, so let me remind you.
Well, I don't know if core members will be checking their calendar right now, or security agents, because there's a huge conversation about what happens. I mean, they have to be concerned too. Who wouldn't be? You send your word for something else, and then they have to be engaged in election duty, and then their security is of huge importance. And with all of this back and forth about ensuring that things go right, people conduct themselves decently about the elections, why not? And so election security is a huge deal for all the personnel that have to be involved, both for INEC officials, the ad hoc staff, the electorate, the voters themselves. Because the thing is, remember when we had that conversation about, I know they're talking about Electoral Offences Commission. We don't know if that will come through before this assembly winds down. But while that is going on, this question about electoral offenders, how to deal with them, who should be pointing them out at the initial stage, how perhaps if INEC identifies someone has committed an electoral offense, who is the, all of those processes, because, I mean, INEC will remember, they did say, once we find out somebody, perhaps, for instance, presents himself or herself with the wrong card, that's an offense already. But INEC usually will be preoccupied with ensuring that things go smoothly. So what they do, they just tell the persons to exit the premises, the perimeter, whatever it is. Narrowly, you understand that the security agencies are supposed to pick those kind of people up. But there's usually some sort of mix-up. I wonder why, even though the security agents maintain a certain distance from the polling units from that particular point. So while all of that conversation go on, because it is also important that is addressed such that anyone who has any intention whatsoever of fomenting trouble, they need to know that the law will not frown at you. They need to know, and not just all of those persons, the foot soldiers. Those who send them there as well, there has to be something done about all of that. Well, I know some time ago, the NYC did sign an MOU where they say the NYC, the core members who will be performing their duties as ad hoc staff will get some sort of insurance cover. So if that were to be applied, I think that might just go a long way. But above all else, every component of these elections, we need to harp on that and ensure that, we beam the spotlight on every part, every aspect, because we cannot afford to get it wrong this time. Given the huge amount of money that is committed to it, we can't keep ensuring, A good thing that Beavers has been introduced now, so many expect, we all expect that it will, to a very large extent, reduce all of this violence that people always want to go about, trying to force their way, trying to tell people might is right. That should be history, I reckon, guys.
Well, Chamberlain, that's if it's history, but you and I know only too well what the issues are, what they remain, more than, 20 years now down the line after a transition to democracy. Well, about security for NYC staff, that is very, very key, to the extent that they need to be assured of their safety while they work, and not just for them, for their parents as well, in their states of primary assignment where they have been deployed. And it's essential, because you only need to see them at work on election day, and then you have compassion, some form of compassion for them. They are neck deep in the work. Who's looking over their shoulder? They can't look over their shoulder to see what's happening in their surroundings, in their environment. they're concentrated on the work. So besides training for ad hoc staff, most of whom happen to be NYSC members, they also need to know, the do's and don'ts. They need to be assured of, their safety while they work. But suffice it to also add that the Acting Director General also talked about matters arising besides security for their members. The fact that they're getting duplicated applications, for requests, for deployment to work on election day. They're also getting, other related requests as well. So this speaks to an endemic problem, the Nigerian factor. Why are graduates, those who have not graduated yet, applying for deployment such that they can be members of the ad hoc staff in the election, on election day? It speaks to the instability in the education system. It speaks to, the Nigerian factor, dishonesty in our value system. And, these issues must be addressed, such that we can indeed have patriotic citizens who are, having a sense of duty to their fatherland and, no other interests. So that said, all of the issues around 2023 elections are related. Security for ad hoc staff, the neutrality of the security agents as well, have their welfare been guaranteed such that they are loyal to the cause and not to politicians. So we can't talk enough about all of that. Security agents must guarantee the sanctity of the system from start to finish. We look forward to a time in this country where elections are not militarized. In Western countries, people, just leave work at a convenient time and then they go vote and they return. But election days in Nigeria are work-free days. And the admonition is you prioritize voting, you prioritize your safety first of all. Some would rather not even come out to vote when their safety is not guaranteed. So these are the issues that must be tackled. So we look forward to a time where we do not have to have, such a heavy security presence in this country before we can be assured, of a free and fair electoral system. Ayo.
How about the people, guys? Yesterday we had this conversation with Pascal Odibo, and he said at the end of the day, we should focus on the people. My mind goes to the 2019 National Security Strategy, which the NSA said is more citizen-centric than state-centric. That to me speaks to the fact that government had realized that over the years they've been more protectionist of the state as opposed to being protectionist of the citizens or of the citizens, which speaks to the people that we're talking about now, the NYSC ad hoc staff of INEC. And they are spread across all 774 local governments and thousands of wards in the country where elections will be held. And all these words, of course, are within local government areas. And I recall the words of the deputy president of the Senate, who was saying that as far as he is concerned, the local government autonomy bill is one of the biggest challenges facing the ongoing review of the Constitution. So if we do not have a system at the local government level that can give some form of first line of defense against insecurity, we are extremely vulnerable. And I think this is not a fact that is unknown to us. Add to that the risk that the Chief Afe Babalola also mentioned when he said, and I quote, "It is not who can make a difference that will win this election. I repeat, it is not the person who has all it takes, age, health, education, and patriotism, that will win the election. The winner of this election, I can bet it, is going to be the person who has made money in this country. It is the person who has the money that will win." Now, we know what that means. Vulnerability of the state, vulnerability of the citizens. So if someone comes and throws money naturally We are looking at insecurity in the face. The question then is, are security agencies factoring in all of these? I know that we're going to have those reports we usually have, Chamberlain, where they will name the amber areas, the red areas, the green areas, whatever it is. They're still going to come. The pattern hasn't changed. Certain states are flashpoints. These things are known. What have we done differently to ensure that we do not have risks to people's lives and that the elections that will be held in these areas are credible? Those are critical issues to look at. We know that INEC has this interagency security apparatus that they use. Do we have the strategies strong enough to assure the citizens, as Bukola has mentioned, that you can come out freely and safely and vote? We are having all kinds of these things happen once every year when we have general elections or at any point where we have elections. We're really looking forward to that time when we will not panic or there will not be a hike or spike in insecurity simply because elections are coming. Election times are employment times. They are not war times. When will we get that message? Chamberlain.
In some other climes, even here in Africa, what they do is while elections are going on, they go about their normal businesses. It doesn't stop. Their lives don't have to stop because they're conducting elections. But if we call ourselves giants of Africa, we need to take those giant steps as well and ensure that we get it right in that department. And you know, another factor in all of this is neutrality of security agents, for goodness sakes. If the opponent or people see that security agencies are beholden to a certain politician who is in office, what do you expect? Would they just sit back, fold their arms in a contest where if they perceive the opponent is using security to their advantage, of course they will fight back and do certain things. So they all need to introspect. Anyways, that said, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the dailies today. And many of them following up on that briefing yesterday from the NFIU. Take, for instance, New Telegraph, if you could kick off with that one. It says, NFIU stops cash withdrawals from government accounts. Yeah. That's New Telegraph, and is the lead story on the front page here today. The writer says states withdrew 701 billion naira in 8 years. So, look, it's one thing to have withdrawn that money. It's another thing to say, okay, were they misappropriated? So two different things. So just listing it here doesn't mean anything unless they're saying that something was wrong. Okay, probably they're saying if it's in violation of the law, if it was misappropriated, then if those contexts, if that's a context of the whole or a media setting, probably, you know. But it is a big lead right here. And then at the bottom of that New Telegraph, increase education tax to 10%, ASU tells FG. As government tasks TET fund authors on books in local languages. Well, there are many authors in local languages. The thing is, they getting their due. Are we approaching these things the right way? So there needs to be a lot more transparency in how we handle all of these things. If at the civil service, all of those bureaucratic bottlenecks and frustrations that those authors face, we need to ensure that we remove all those impediments, be not just about tasking them. Have we looked at the process and ensured the process is smooth? Because for all you know, they might be working their socks off, and then those impediments and those bottlenecks are the ones frustrating us. So we need to check all of those things and be sure there's a free flow or proper transition when they do come in, because nobody wants to keep facing this holders time and again. They'll just go on to something else. So I won't give them any hassles. NANS gives FG Unimate 2 weeks ultimatum to reverse registration increment. Okay, so different scenarios playing itself out right there. So that is New Telegraph. I'm not sure you saw it, but that's New Telegraph this morning, everybody.
Well, Chamberlain, just before we take the papers from Bukola, the question about the author, education books for education in Nigeria that you just raised. The question again that I ask is, what's the vision? Why should anyone decide that, okay, I want to write textbooks for Nigerian students? What is the vision? How? Do we still call our local languages vernacular and call English language the official, or whatever it is, the one that makes you look good?
Lingua franca. Well, so many things to talk about in that regard. You could also look at the education tax and, all of the consequences that would arise as a result of that one. The impact on the enrollment of students in the tertiary education sector. Are we emphasizing on education for the rich rather than education for the poor? So we could go on and on. But let's take a look at Leadership newspaper this morning, and it has for you that lead story on Telegraph as well, and this is the way it is captioned. In renewed anti-graft war, NFIU goes after FG states and local governments. Look at the riders on the front page of Leadership. Bans cash withdrawals on all government accounts, gives March the 1st as deadline. Partners EFCC, ICPC to try offenders.
I'm looking forward to us, having or hosting the NFIU boss, because one of the things that he said was that civil servants, if going by the law, if the NFIU was to enforce the laws, all public servants who were involved in that process deserve 3-year jail term each. What's stopping them?
Okay. I get you. 3 years is insignificant, right?
No.
You can
what
risk
is stopping NFIU? Start from there. Is that not what the law says? Mm-hmm. Start from there first.
Okay. I will look forward to him answering that question one of these days. Okay. There's more to look at on the front page of Leadership on Friday. Let's go beneath the nameplates now to see these ones. Customs frustrating cargo clearance at seaports as ascribed to clearing agents. Just right beside that one, campaigns are in full swing. It's the political season, political new year. And this one is captioned this way: 2023, Governor Abiodun kickstarts campaign in Ogun State. We had the campaign in Oyo State, and that's also captured here on the front page of Leadership on Friday. Go beneath the big story now to find it on the right-hand corner. 2023, G5 governors fail to unveil preferred candidate. The suspense continues. The G5 governors are leading us, to continue to guess, that mouth-watering effect.
I find it very, very interesting when editors couch some headlines. They failed to. Really?
Ayo, if you know, please tell us.
They failed
Perhaps
to.
Perhaps you have information from
the
grapevine.
They failed to or have not. Failed to is a language of smoking someone out. So please, G5, Integrity Group, G5 governors, whichever one. Guys, just come up with it. Okay, this suspense is, let's just know. Or you don't want to endorse anyone.
More important than that, Ayo, is PVC collection. And INEC wants you to collect your PVC, and the Commission is trying to make it easy for you. Look at this one on at the bottom strip. INEC devolves PVC collection towards registration areas today. So go collect your PVC, and that will be on until January the 15th. And after that, the PVCs are returned yet again to the local government, I think until January the 29th. I'm not quite sure of the date, but you'll find that in subsequent news on Channels Television later today. Moved to local government at a certain date within January for onward collection. So it's been made easy. Go to your registration areas and your wards for your PVC collection. So whatever the G5 governors, whatever choice they make eventually, it is for you to decide. But you can only do that if you have your PVC.
Well,
Ayo.
Talking about the PVCs, the Daily Trust has on its front page, right below the picture on its front page, INEC devolves PVC's collection to wards and registration areas, so they're taking it even closer to you. And I hope this is the time that they are giving PVCs out on Saturdays and Sundays as well. The lead story of Daily Trust newspaper has this one: cash withdrawals from government accounts to end March 1. Anyway, because it's really very troubling when you look at that story. But please do pick up a copy of Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Look at the writers. Officials to receive Ester code allowances through accounts. FG states LGs withdrew over 1 trillion naira since 2015. I'm guessing that's about cash withdrawals. Implementation requires political will. That's ascribed to an expert. Find out who on page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Program ought to have started alongside TSA. Who said that? The story is on the inside pages of the paper this morning. And right under the story, the headline below the pictures, is this one: LG autonomy bill hindering constitutional amendment, ascribed to Omar Agege. And there's a very troubling story at the bottom of that page. 5-day-old boy risks amputation over doctor's, quote, negligence in Kano. I'm wondering what the mother is going through right now. I don't even know where to put it. Right under the nameplate, OPEC's oil output rises as Nigeria rebounds. Find the details of that on page 26 of the Daily Trust newspaper. 18 Borno passengers burnt to death in Bauchi auto crash. I really, really wish we'd heard the last of these things. But that's the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Chamberlain?
News Direct today, they lead with something entirely different, and it's about oil theft. Eradicate oil theft before May 29. Buhari tasks Nigerian armed forces as NNPC debunks illegal exports of 17.877 million barrels of crude oil. But I wonder what you make of this before May 29. That's a handover date. So if they don't, what happens? Well, because I mean, if you were the one who got that directive, you just think, okay, May 29, all right. What if I don't do it before May 29? Well, exited anyways, so there might not be any punitive action. So I just wonder if that's going to be enough to get them to sit up. Just thinking aloud, really, because if we were a lot earlier than this May 29 date, would they even be afraid of sack up? I don't know, man. But there's a committee, actually, which has also been set up to, investigate crude oil theft, make recommendations. And they're submitting their report when? February, thereabouts, when everyone will be focusing on elections. Well, I know. You'll tell me government is to continue. We know. Okay. That is a big lead. I've got several other stories here, but that's New Telegraph this morning. I beg your pardon, News Direct today. Well, Friday effect, I tell you.
We have one thing in common, new. But this is Nigeria this morning. Let's turn our attention. And it chooses to lead differently as against News Direct and leadership. This is how the big story is captioned. 2023, you can't impose president on Nigerians. Tinubu lashes out at Obasanjo over Obi's endorsement. Ohaneze, only enemies of country are rattled by LP candidates backing. I didn't say it. This one is from Ohaneze. Well, so many views. It's a political season, so these things shouldn't surprise you, as they do not surprise us on this side of the divide. Well, look at this one as well. Of course, we saw that in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, yesterday, and that's the big picture on the front page. You can see the governor of the Oyo State, brandishing the flag of the party, the PDP. And the story is right beside that. G5 governors, storm Oyo for Makinde, Withdraw now. Wike tells APC's Folari others. This is a more comforting headline for you than the other.
Which one?
G5 governors storm Oyo for Makinde. So there's no fail to announce presidential candidate.
Is it a storm?
All right. And that one you also highlighted for us earlier is also captured here. Highest bidder will win 2023 polls, says Afe Papalola.
So the election of 2023 is an auction?
We have to keep talking about it and ensure that it's not an auction. Take a look at this one, lastly, before we exit this Nigeria. Nigeria lost 6 trillion naira to tax incentives, waivers in 12 months.
Wow.
That's ascribed to the finance minister. And if you're interested in details, you'll find them on page 15 inside this Nigeria. How did we lose this amount of money?
Discretion.
Well, I would have thought that the charge of the ministry is to mobilize revenue, is to mop up revenue from wherever they can be found, besides budgeting and planning.
Discretion. Some maybe chief executive of some ministry, department or agency will just say, okay, just sign and waive a particular tax, levy or whatever for someone. If you accumulate, it may not even be much, maybe like 10,000 here, 100,000 there, 500,000 there. Everything accumulates to 12 trillion naira, I think, and that's what I think that the finance minister is saying there. And just imagine, we have a budget deficit for 2023 of up to 12 trillion naira. If that had come in, we'll have less deficit, right?
I think this is a quarter of the 2023 budget.
And this
6 trillion naira.
And this is half of the outstanding of the deficit that we have, according to all of the information available to us. Add that to the information we don't have yet, which is probably being collated by the Office of the Auditor General, which is the Auditor General's report. I won't stop talking about it until we begin to have action taken on the Auditor General's report. Otherwise, why do we have an Auditor General's office? Why do we have an Auditor General's report, which is not cheap to produce? And at the end of the day, it gathers dust for 2-3 years before we start taking action. What happens to all of the indictments? What happened to all of the corruption?
I wonder how this also relates to the NFIU's, position now that cash withdrawals have been banned from the all public accounts.
Okay, I guess we just wait to see, because as one of the headlines says here, implementation deserves political will. Without the political will to implement as should be, it's just going to be another talk shop. Look at the Guardian newspaper has this one on its front page. 2023, tame inflation, insecurity, fuel subsidy. Experts tell government. That's the lead of the Guardian newspaper this morning. And what do you have, as writers? One on wrong steps ahead of elections. It's significant year for Nigerians, says Ajibola. How electoral outcome will determine economic progress. Inflation, cost of living crisis among major challenges. Certainly whoever becomes president this year is not going to have it easy. Well, look at the main story there, how cost of production, import dependence undermine national drug security. Certainly something very troubling. The story is on pages 6 and 7 of the paper today. How House taking 9th votes as McCarthy again fails to sway rebels. Find the details of that on page 2 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Okay, right under the nameplate, NFIU talks tough on cash withdrawal limits, threatens offenders with imprisonment. I said it the other time. Anyway, that story you'll find on the inside pages of the paper this morning. Please don't just talk tough. Be tough.
Do the tough.
Do the tough. I hear that there are some dogs that can bite but can't. That can bark but can't bite. Please do the 2 NFIU, so long as it's within the precincts of the law. EFCC shouldn't be in existence, Nigerian constitution faulty, says Abakuba. Oh, really? Well, it's been 23 years, and we have been trying to amend, we have amended the constitution a few times. We're hoping that more of that will happen with this current process going on now.
It speaks to the multiplicity of institutions. You have the EFCC, you have the ICPC, I believe you also have the criminal investigation department of the police as well. You know, so why we have all of these institutions, it seems like a replication of responsibility, and we're still going nowhere. It's like taking one step back, one step forward, and then 2 steps back.
I wouldn't say it's a multiplicity. I would say perhaps looking at it a little more, maybe differently, is to say, okay, these units, for instance, you're correct. The police has a unit that is supposed to be dealing with this. That is why the pioneer chairman of the EFCC, for instance, were policemen. Expectedly, it's what you're supposed to do in the police. You've not been able to do it, so here is something that's supposed to go. The question is, what have we been able to achieve significantly over time? The departments and the police that are supposed to do what the EFCC is doing, is it still in existence? If so, why? If not, why? I mean, these things
have they carried out investigations and prosecutions successfully in that regard? And what happened over the years?
And then what happened to SWAT? Okay, just 2 more here very quickly. FG to transfer 613 rehabilitated repentant terrorists to states. Okay, 613 rehabilitated repentant terrorists. Okay. That's the Guardian newspaper this morning.
That's it. We'll look at some of the dailies here as well today. We will be back in just a moment. Stay with us.
When we compiled the cash withdrawals over a period of time, precisely from 2015 till date, we discovered that state governments have withdrawn over 701 billion in cash, with some states withdrawing up to 24 billion naira. And then we also discovered that the federal government withdrew in cash up to 225 billion, while the local governments withdrew up to 156 billion. So if we are to apply the law here, all the public servants involved in these withdrawals are entitled to 3 years imprisonment. That's what the law said. Now, it became necessary for us to direct and order the financial institutions to stop completely cash withdrawal from public accounts. We have issued an advisory to all the governors and all the local government chairmen and all the MDs in the federal government we give them between now and 1st of March 2023 to put all facilities in place to operationalize the guidelines. So what is the bottom line? Is that on the 1st of March, if there is cash withdrawal from a government account of even if it is 1 naira, we are going to trigger off money laundering and corruption investigation anywhere at all. Even if there are special needs to withdraw cash from any public account anywhere, that will have to get a presidential approval.
All right, welcome back. That is what we'll be talking about today on the program. Mr. Jibrin Okutapa joins us here. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria. Good morning. Thank you for coming on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
Well, this is already generating several reactions now. This directive that statement by the NFIU saying by the 1st of March, no cash withdrawal whatsoever at the federal and state level. So if anyone violates it, they say they're going to trigger investigations and ensure that money laundering offenses will be perhaps pursued against those persons. And while some disagree, others think, well, I'm not too sure about some of these things. So from the point of law, what do you think of this?
Well, first and foremost, I think that Nigeria must develop some level of shock absorber to absorb some of the fine policies of government. We mustn't always be at cross purposes with our government. Now, the NIFU is a creation of an act of parliament, Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit. It's an act, it was created by an act of parliament. And if you look at the act of 2018 that set up or created this agency, it vests it with wide power to do, and it has to do with something that enforcing, one of which function is enforcement of the provisions of Money Laundering Act. Now, I was reading somewhere, and I was amazed to see that between 2015 and now, over 701 trillion naira was said to have been withdrawn in cash from our bank. Now, when you look at all of these things and vis-a-vis the kind of ostentatious lifestyle that we display, particularly the public officers who hold public office in public trust for Nigerian people, one then begins to wonder, where did they generate this money from? And how are they spending this money? If you go for a wedding or some social functions or even political rallies, you will notice that because of the degree of poverty level in Nigeria, a political juggernaut will be flowing money and throwing it at Nigerians who will be picking the crumble that falls from the, the convoy of these political people.
We cannot say it is the monies they withdrew from there that they
well, no one mints money. And so no one goes to Nigerian printing and publishing minting company and say, print naira for me. This money, if you do a job, you have to be paid. Now, you may be paid in cash. And mark you, under the Money Laundering Prohibition Act, there are certain amount of treasure holds that you cannot withdraw. Yeah. You cannot hold.
But about that one, that earlier point you made, Mr. Kutakpa, the thing is, the way corporations function is, even if you withdraw several huge amounts of money, what they usually will do is they will ask you, all right, account for that money.
Yes.
Come up with the documents and the receipts. Is that not a failure of those agencies to properly track all of those things? In the first instance.
In the first instance, I agree with you that there are complete failure of institutions in Nigeria. In fact, the banking industry that we operate in Nigeria appears to be in contradistinction with what happened all over the world. If you go to your bank, for instance, to say, give me information about accounts that was open, say, in 2000, you may have difficulties in retrieving information because we are very careless about information management in this country. So back to this Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, let's not lose sight of why we are here. I support their position and enforcement of the provisions of the act that set them up in order to prevent money laundering. Two, we are getting into election. And in this election year, INEC and the rest have been crying, and the rest Nigerians have also been talking that vote buying had become the order of the day in Nigeria electoral system. I agree that no government official should be allowed, including governors, ministers, presidential aides, even the president himself, should not be allowed to withdraw humongous amount of money.
You think this is targeted to for elections?
Well, it may not be targeted to, but it's not too far from it.
But if it were, presidential election and that of Senate and the likes, it's February. They say this is on the 1st of March. So they would have finished the first part of the elections and then on to the next before this takes effect.
Well, I agree. But from March, we still have political activities. Mark you that Nigerian election system does not end only with the election. There is a pre, post, during, and post-election. Now, after elections have been conducted, you are aware that some persons who are hoping to become something may engage practitioners, legal practitioners, consultants, with the hope that their mandate, in quote, or whatever, be defended and they pay from government coffers. I believe that if this policy is religiously enforced, we will be able to find out why, in most cases, humongous amount of money are withdrawn from government treasuries, and you see nothing or little that government has done with that money. For instance, you talk about this thing you call about security votes. There are a lot of money being withdrawn under the guise of security votes, and yet we are in a state of nature where life has become so brutish, shortish, and nasty, and people are afraid to even go to their villages.
So this will also mean that all funds, including the so-called security votes, cannot be withdrawn in cash anymore.
That's what it means, unless and until there is proven evidence that the president approves that you withdraw the money. And my fear about this policy is not the intention, it's the ability to follow through. Can the NFIU follow through? Does he have the lever to do it?
So from the point of law, you think they are in order?
For a point of law,
states as well.
Point of law, looking at the provisions of the law that set up the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Units, particularly look at Section 1 that set up the aim and objectives of that unit. Look at Section 2 that created the Act, and look at Section 3 also that set out the functions that this agency needs to do. See, Chamberlain, Nigeria is the only country where we don't trust our government agencies. And the reason is very simple. Because we don't have that element that the other advanced countries have, that they are patriotic and nationalistic. You can't go to UK, for instance, and see government ministers or government functionaries withdrawing pound sterling and go to political rally. In fact, when I went to UK at a point in time, and I was buying something, and I was bringing out 100 pounds, instead of either 10 pounds, 5 pounds, or 50 pounds. The people collecting that 100 pounds from me were going in and out to come to find out, who is this one that is bringing this kind of money? So, and then I asked my sister-in-law, what is going on here? She said, no, this is a cashless society where you don't spend money like that. So I now have to explain to them, well, before I came in, I declared this money at the airport because I didn't have an account domiciled in the United States of United Kingdom. And so I have to buy something in cash. It's okay, that's right, that's right. They subjected me to some thorough, but not here. Here, if I just succeeded in withdrawing huge amount of money of government from treasury today, and I go somewhere like in Wuse Market, and I start distributing it and flagging it here and there, Nigerians will be happy to pick it because there is a general belief that all of us are thieves.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Paul Ananaba. He joins us virtually today. Good morning, Dr. Ananaba. Thank you for joining us on the program. Well, what is your position on this matter? That the NFIU has said that from the 1st of March, it will be illegal for any cash withdrawal, cash transaction from any public accounts. Violation of that will trigger the anti-corruption agencies, to level money laundering charges or cases against any state official or public servant who embarks on such.
Right. Let me start by greeting my friend Jay Soko and then position here, probably I agree, but I think that.
Oh, you're coming in broken. We can actually make out what's exactly the point. So we'll try that connection again so that we can get your sound correct. But in the meantime, let me bring in my colleagues in Lagos. They may have a question for you, Mr. Kuchekwa. Go ahead, guys.
Let me begin, Mr. Kuchekwa, by asking, from the benefit of hindsight, I mean, you began by saying, well, part of what you said earlier was that you have doubts about government following through. And you also expressed a reason why it seems Nigerians don't generally have complete trust in government or government officials. Now, going by some of the things that the chief executive of NFIU said, that if they were to implement the law to the letter, the public officials who were involved in these withdrawals prior to now, they deserve 3-year jail terms each. The question then, in your opinion, sir, is why is that law not implemented so that there will be some measure of deterrence? Because 1 trillion naira from public accounts in cash, possibly not fully accounted for, is no small token.
Well, I cannot hazard the guess why they had not been able to implement and enforce that law up to now. But it is better late than never. For me, let them enforce the provisions of the law. The Money Laundering Prohibition Act is there. The Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit Act is there. They don't think I don't think they have the power to criminalize the withdrawal, but they have the power to investigate and refer them to relevant government agencies for purposes of prosecution. Because under the Money Laundering Act, for instance, Money Laundering and Prohibition Act, for instance, you can't withdraw more than a certain amount of money from the bank. And all transactions have to go through financial institutions. If you look at sometimes many of the cases that are in court at the instance and behest of EFCC have to do with the humongous amount of money that were being withdrawn and were withdrawn, rather, from our banks, including our own Central Bank of Nigeria, that did not follow through the laid down regulations. And like I keep saying consistently, our problem in this country is not the absence of law. There are laws that will have made this country a very safe haven for anyone to come in and transact business and go. But it is the capacity, ability to enforce the law and visit the violators of this law with sanctions that is the bane of this country. So for me, I will support any law that any person or group of persons that will enforce our law that will bring sanity to this country. Well, because the absence of sanity in Nigeria is traceable and it's a function of non-enforcement of our laws, well, which provisions are there for anyone to see.
Yeah, while that is valid, and I mean, I understand what you're saying, but you know, the question then arises as to why not enforce the laws? I believe that at least every state in Nigeria and every local government has a legal department. The states, for instance, have the attorneys general and the commissioners for justice. They know all of these laws. They know the things that should be done or should not be done. Wouldn't you say that these officials of government are aware of the law and consequently culpable for the government breaking the law willy-nilly?
Majority are aware, or all of them are aware, but we seem to have this thing in our DNA that you can do anything and go away with it. Otherwise, why, for instance, will somebody go to the Central Bank of Nigeria with a written note and get money from that bank? Why should anybody go to the bank and withdraw government money and is not held accountable for it? So we are suffering from what I may refer to as absence of nationalism and patriotism. Everyone is to himself. No one believes that Nigerian society should function properly for the maximum benefit of the rest of Nigerian people. That is why, for instance, acquisition of political power is a means of production in Nigeria. Once you are poor and you get to government, you can do anything and get away with it. So I think that, yes, the government, they are aware. This political class, the civil servant, they are aware. Government should do more and be seen to be do the thing rightly and avoid political persecution. Let it not be selective prosecution. Let it not be selective investigation. And I will appeal to Mr. President that in giving approval, it should not be seen to be a partisan president that gives approval to his political party's members.
Well, Mr. Kutakwa, we'll come to that proviso shortly. Just a second. We'll come back to that proviso, shortly. But there's a caution you raised earlier when you said you have questions about whether or not the NFIU and its partners, the EFCC, ICPC, and the rest of them, will be able to follow through with this provision, this policy that they have come up with. But it's expected that the institutions at the state level should be able to support this policy. Do you see that happening? And if you see it happening, whether or not you see it happening, what should be the role of the attorneys general and commissioners of justice and all legal practitioners within the confines of each of these state governments and local governments over time? Because unless the structures in the states themselves are strong enough to absorb this policy, it's going to go in the way of others, just as you've said.
The EFCC Act, the ICPC Act, and other laws seems to have vested the investigations of crime in the financial crime and corruption cases in the Economic and Financial Crime Commission. So for me, the cooperation of the states and state officials and government officials may be difficult to get because of the selfish, partisan, and primordial consideration. Because a lot of people in the states want money to grab power. A lot of them need money to retain power. And so I will suggest that the EFCC that have been shadowed with the responsibility and this Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit that have been given the responsibility of seeing that we prevent money laundering, terrorism, financing, and so on and so forth, be allowed unhindered and unfettered right to do their job. So as for the Attorney General, I do not know whether indeed some of them are indeed Attorney General, because it appears to me that the moment some of our colleagues accept to become Attorney General of either the states or sometimes even of the Federation, their independence of legal minds to do and to advise what is right appears to disappear from their subconsciousness. And so it appears to me that the governors, the appointers of the Attorney General are almighty within the Nigerian context.
All right.
So we can't strictly blame them for this. Some will not want to leave.
I wonder.
Let me bring in
I wonder.
Dr. Ananaba. I think we should be able to hear him now. Dr. Ananaba, I hope you can hear us at the moment. So could you go ahead and give us your perspective in terms of what the point you were going to make about this?
The point I was going to make is, let me even go back to history. Right from when I was in primary school, I had heard governments led by most of the people who are leading now tell us that Health for All, 1990, House for All, 1990. We are past 1990. We moved on to 2000. We moved on to 2010. And we moved on to 2020. We are in 2023. The rest is history. So when we talk about good faith, about governance, every Nigerian of adult age should know. The point I'm making is, let us...
Just a minute, Dr. Ananaba. Could you turn down the volume of your set? It's howling back at us.
Okay. The point I am making is that we cannot base things in this country based on good faith. There is no degree of measurement. If you look at the NFIU Act, it does not give them powers to make the type of orders they are making. That is my view. There may be good reasons for trying to curb the way cash has been withdrawn in the country. But till today, I don't know how many people they can point out to say, yes, we have apprehended these people and we have prosecuted them. So let's not run on sentiment. I don't think that NFIU has the powers to stop a state government from withdrawing cash. That too, even if the act says so, it will be running against the Constitution.
All right.
The Constitution has...
Just give us a moment. We need to go on a quick break. Just hold the line. We'll come back and get you to conclude your thoughts on this matter. We will be right back. All right, welcome back. Dr. Porter Ananaba, go ahead, because you were saying that they do not have the powers under the NFIU Act to do what they're doing. So quite a number of things. So they have made that announcement, and then they say they will activate the anti-corruption agencies, both the EFCC, the ICPC, to investigate. So they will be working with those agencies. So what part of what they've done is it that they don't have any right to do from the point of law, from your perspective?
The point I'm making is, you can see them begin to come to reality when they said they will now have to work with the other agencies. Starting alone, NFIU ought not to have made that statement. It could have been possibly a joint statement. But beyond that, you want to go cashless. Does NFIU have the capacity, or can they guarantee that Nigeria, that the financial system will guarantee a cashless, total cashless society by March 1? Now, I would have expected that CBN and other financial institutions will be part of a coalition that will bring this to pass. Now, any of these acts, EFCC, ICPC, or NFIU Act, not have a constitution. constitutions for states and for local governments. The Constitution is bigger and higher than any other law as a growing law. So, on what basis will NFIU give directive to states? That's the point. It's not the sentiment of, they mean well, so let's go. When things go wrong from that road, how do we address them? So I think that
if I understand your point, are you saying that
within the law?
Okay, just a minute, Dr. Nadaba. Does it mean then that the non-functional nature or the poor connection capacity questions of the cashless platforms, so does that then invalidate the point that NFIU is making, that, or the law, that they say you cannot carry out those transactions? Is that your point here, that the non-functioning of that platform invalidates that point, that law?
Say, the Messiah, they've come to help cop this excess cash and all that, cash in wrong hands. I say, well, that's my response to that. My major response is that the act setting them up, they cannot go outside the law setting them up. I have read that law, that act, like 2018. It doesn't give them powers to regulate cash withdrawal up to states. And I've also asked you, if they are saying, yes, over $1 trillion has been withdrawn by cash and all that, who have they prosecuted all this while? Do you need to make an announcement after the act 2018 till now for you to say, to show that people have contravened this legislation? So why is it coming at a time in 2023 when immediately after presidential elections? March 1 will be immediately after presidential elections, when the other elections are still ongoing. Why is it coming in a year also we're having a census? Why is it coming from NFIU and without a coalition of other? So you look at it from the practicality point, you look at it from the legal point.
So is your point such that if NFIU had held a joint press conference with probably the EFCC or the ICPC, or if they are working with those agencies, they will then have a legal cover, or at least it will be legitimate for them to do that?
But not up to the states. You see, NFIU is coming from the Federal Republic, from the Federation. The Section 4, 5, and 6 of the Constitution are there. The National Assembly makes law for the Federation. If you look at the Supreme Court decision in Attorney General of Bender State and Attorney General of the Federation, it was a 1981 decision of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, once money has left the Federation account and is been shared among the states, the federal government has no powers to regulate the money of the states. I'm not encouraging rascality by governors and misusing funds for that. If that had happened, I expected NFIU to give facts and figures and say, this state did this, this one did this, this one did this. And once the governors are believing, they will apprehend them and prosecute them.
Yeah, but isn't it the same principle?
To prosecute, they have to analyze, they have to collect information, they have to assess, not to be issuing orders, so in my mind.
So isn't it the same principle that, for instance, the EFCC uses to investigate governors and public accounts at the state level, and then when the directive comes through from federal agency, like such as the CBN, all states, individuals, everybody complies with that. Is that not in the same breath that they do that?
EFCC has been acting within the law. They investigate. EFCC has never come up to say, to give directives to states and local governments. That's what my point has always been. They can investigate states. They can make statements that are not directory to say, we are investigating states that withdraw, that contravene the Money Laundering Act.
All right.
They have such powers. But they do not have power to say, from this point, you cannot do this. They don't regulate monetary policy in this country. I don't think there's also the CBN Act and all that. So that's why I was saying, yeah, if it was a coalition, we could find some explanations. But as it is, their act does not allow, the law act setting them up does not empower them to do, to issue orders. I think they should review.
All right, Mr. Nanaba, I know that you need to catch.
I see the need to intervene by NFIU, but they should not. Because if we say NFIU, fine. What if we will be setting a precedent for other agencies to also issue orders just because they think they were doing well?
Okay, I know that you need to run. If not, I would have loved you could get your friend here, Mr. Kuzokba, to get his perspective in. My colleagues ask questions of you, but we understand that you need to run. We do thank you very much indeed for your time and perspective, Dr. Paul Ananaba, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Safe flight.
You heard him there.
I heard him. He's my friend and my callmate, so we know ourselves very well. But with profound respect to my friend, Professor Ananaba, bringing question of constitution in this matter is likely to confuse the issue. Now, I did not see what the NFIU had done as a sort of directives. I see it as information that because government has what they call cashless policy, that from March, no government officials will be allowed to withdraw cash from government accounts. We must make that point very clear. Nobody is stopping transaction, but for purposes of accountability,
we are stopping the mode of transaction.
We are stopping the mode of transaction. The mode of transaction that used to be that you go to Bank A, you want 1 billion naira, and then the bank manager run helter-skelter and give it to you, you go away with it. We are stopping it. And if you check the act setting up the agency, look at the order, it's supposed to be an agency that creates a level playing field ground, avoidance of money laundering, avoidance of terrorism financing, analyzing and giving information about all of these financial misappropriation and delinquencies.
Yeah, but Mr. Kutagba, you know, in spite of all of
before that, my learner friend was talking about constitution. Now, let me be very clear that banking and financing is on exclusive legislative lists. So no state government or no local government has legislative competence to legislate on banking and finance. Only the federal government.
So wherein comes the federating unit's function?
That's another cup of tea. But as of today, that is a law. And so the only competent authority that regulates inflow, financial institution, money and all of that is the federal government.
So why then do we have states, local government, federal accounts?
That is why we also have been spending humongous amount of money to amend our constitution. As of today, speaking for myself, Nigeria is operating a unitary federal system where all powers are concentrated at the center. And we are the reason why the other time an elder statesman, an erudite professor and a scholar of note, Professor Nwabueze, was regretting that their thought in having this type of constitution was that things were going to be done well. Today, you see that all powers are concentrated at the center. And the local government, the state government, and what have you, comes to Abuja for handout.
All right.
So that is our law.
All right, let's get my colleagues in. They've got questions for you. Go ahead, guys.
All right, Mr. Kutekwa, I'd like us to now look at the proviso. The DG NFIU also added that henceforth, all withdrawals will now have to secure the approval of the president. So in that regard, do you anticipate, bureaucracy, setting in at that point? Imagine, there's a contingency requirement for some funds, and you have to get the approval of the president. How many approvals can the president actually sign in a day or in a week?
Honestly, I do not know how the president will cope with it. Apart from bureaucracy, it becomes another weapon for political corruption, with respect. Because before you can see Mr. President, it's like a camel going through the eye of the needle. And so if you have a need for amount of money that needs to be paid in cash, then how do you get Mr. President? How does a man, for instance, who lives somewhere far away from Abuja, there is no good road, need to bring, how are they going to cope with it? That's a disadvantage that I see. Another disadvantage that my learned friend pointed out, which I agree with completely, is that are we sufficiently matured in terms of technology for cashless policy? Going to villages, my old grandparents and mothers in the village, if they were alive, how do we have banks in my village and the villages of most of us who are in town? Do we even have the internet facilities, even within the banking system in Abuja, for instance, and some other cities? Each time you go to your bank, you are told that the network is down. How has the government set up the facilities to meet these exigencies? Because in other climes that we're trying to copy from, their internets work 24/7. The facilities are superb, and there is no power outage, for instance. Are we going to buy solars and fix in the villages? How many banks do we have in our remote villages? Are we being told that the market men and women in those villages are not going to transact banking system? They are not going to use money to do businesses. So these are advantages that I see. But on the basis of whether or not the intention is correct, I will support it. But the disadvantages, with respect, outweigh the advantages we are seeking to gain. Now,
right.
if we are limiting
your
it to
your learned colleague also asked a very
it will
critical...
be huru for me.
Yeah,
and I will support it.
Mr.
Because
Kutekwa,
no market man or woman in the village go to government treasury to withdraw money.
Your learned colleague also asked a very critical question. He said, why is it coming after the election, now the date that it will become effective from? Speaking of which, I'd like you to look at it, critically at this point. Where does it now, I'm losing my train of thought now, pardon me. If the goal is to tackle corruption, yes, if the goal is to tackle corruption, you rightly noted that, it's going to check withdrawals of, security vote and all of that. Aren't we fishing in wrong waters, Mr. Kutekwa, if the goal is to tackle corruption? Because, some of the biggest corruption cases have been done without necessarily cash withdrawals, but with the pen.
You see, my problem with us in Nigeria is that there is nothing you do that either the timing or the way it is being done will not be subjected to various interpretations. And the reason is very simple, because we are each suspicious of one another. The motive may be right, the intention may be right, but there may be bad motive towards it. So when is it right to commence the enforcement of the provisions of the law? Is it not better late than not done at all? For me, I have no problem as to when is to commence and how it's being commenced. but are we genuinely committed to enforcing it? That's the fundamental we need to do. Have we suddenly become born again that will change our attitude and our orientation, and we are not going to be selective, for instance, even about the presidential approval? Who will get express passage to the president for president to approve? Will it not assume a political coloration? Are we not going to look at it now from the point of view, or either from the north, south, east, and west? Because these have been our bane. So it is because we seem to be divided on primordial ethnic lines and partisanship and selfish interests, not the interests of Federal Republic of Nigeria, that most of these inquisitions are being done by Nigerians with objective minds. So for me, he is right to raise the question, why is it coming now? But when should it come? He reeled out so many things that government has said held for all by 2000. And in 2023, we still have, in the word of President Muhammad Buhari, our hospitals are still a mere consulting clinics. So we don't have facilities to attend to people. Just on Christmas Day, for instance, a lawyer was gunned down in broad daylight by a policeman. She was taken to about 3 or so hospitals. Facilities were not there to resuscitate her. She gave up. So when all these are reasons why Nigerians are questioning even the intention and motive of government.
So
and
if
government
that is
needs
the
to
case,
demonstrate
then,
absolute commitment
if that is the case, then,
loyalty to Nigerian people by being committed and doing what they need to do.
If that is the case, then, if you note that there's no right time, the DG of the NFIU also said that if the guidelines, as it is now, is implemented, any public official that withdraws risk a jail term of 3 years. Why can't it be activated now? Why give the leeway, for the act that will be tantamount to a crime? Why give a leeway for it to be committed?
Well, time does not run against the state. As far as I'm concerned, what I think the DG of Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit had done is to give information that we are going to be serious from 1st of March, which to me also shows that hitherto they were not serious with respect to them to enforce the provisions of the law, because the law has always been there. The public officers have the civil service rules or public service rules about financial regulations and financial transactions. In those days when we have civil servants that are nationalistic and patriotic, you don't go withdrawing money of government from public treasury without first of all raising a voucher. This voucher will be cross-checked. Other public officials will monitor it. So we don't just wake up and say, pick a pen and address a note to the governor of Central Bank and say, please let me have so and so amount of money in dollars and in pound sterling and in forex. No. And even the person to whom that letter is addressed to, who had the duty and responsibility not to honor it. But in Nigeria of today, the moment you and I suddenly find ourselves as president of Nigeria, as governors, or even local government chairman, we become demigod, and people now worship us rather than owing allegiance to the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, until our allegiance is to the Federal Republic of Nigeria and Nigerian Constitution, and not the occupant of the office. So we will continue to sing the songs of failure that we see. Even this one, with respect, I do not see them push it through. We are just being gathered here today for purposes of debating the merit of the arguments.
So
the
from
same
the point,
set of human beings.
So from the point
tomorrow,
of the Constitution,
violate even their own guidelines with impunity, and who is policing the police?
So from the point of the Constitution, Mr.
Why do you think that the agencies, all these anti-corruption agencies, have not prosecuted any bank? These banks are a huge profit.
Indeed, Shambali, that is the question. I asked the question. Indeed, some of these banks are, with all respect, are violating Nigerian law with such impunity and audacity of arrogance that if I were to be in a position of authority, their banking license would have been withdrawn by now. But even when there are court orders, some of these banks, with respect, circumvent them in favor of money bags to bring down the economy of this country or to undermine the authority of Nigerian courts. Indeed, in other clime, the mere fact that a process is filed makes the citizen to respect the institution of court. But today, virtually everyone appear not to respect the institution of court. So some of these banking institutions need to be thoroughly, because the problem of Nigeria, if you ask me about corruption, are Nigerian banks, with respect, because they do things that they ought not to do. And the central bank should be up and doing, because the Central Bank of Nigeria has the power, the authority, and regulatory capacity to ensure that there is financial probity, financial accountability within the banking sector. But today, a lot of very serious I don't want to use the word operating in my mind, but I can't resist it. The kind of corruption going on in our banking industry is so humongous and so mind-boggling that it will take a man that is resolutely committed, patriotically, nationalistically, to tackle it, because heads need to roll. Unless head rolls, Nigerian people will suffer. Accounts are open without even knowing who brings the money. They are interested in having money for purposes of profit to the detriment of economic development of Nigeria. For me, finally, before you say, I don't think that we are operating banking institution in Nigeria. What we operate are deposit house where you keep money and then to get it back legitimately, except through other means, you have challenges.
Well, thank you for coming on, Mr. Jibrin Okutegba. But the questions for the authorities there, why is this coming after the presidential elections? Is what's good for the goose, not good for the gander? So what is happening to banks who have been found culpable? Are they, or is the law now a respecter of institutions and persons, as it were? So food for thought. We will be back in just a moment. Incidentally, we'll be talking about a similar matter. It's a financial matter too, so stay with us. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. As you've seen there, Mr. Ibrahim Modibo joins us next. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Mr. Chamberlain.
Yeah, just finished taking a look at this NFIU provisions, funds transfer, how things should go. And here we are now talking about this allegation of 150 billion naira fraud. And sometimes you see these figures, and as reporters, when you write these figures, sometimes when you take a back seat and just think about it, you just wonder what really is going on here. But for this particular case, it's been back and forth. Several perspectives and scenarios, agencies involved in this matter. There was a petition against individuals, about 15 of them, including the managing director of NIRSAL. Then there are several other persons alongside him. But at the moment, he's not in office. And then there are questions as to what really the situation is at the moment with this investigation. So first of all, start off with telling us about your impression of this fraud allegation against him.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chamberlain, for giving me this invitation this morning to talk on this issue of great importance. You see, the allegation of fraud is based on some misconceptions, misperceptions, misrepresentation of facts, And also, it had to do with the virtue, I don't know, with the evils of social media, so to say, where some people, because of some pecuniary reasons, tend to use the social media as a weapon of trying to oust somebody they don't like his face. As far as I'm concerned, based on the Freedom of Information Bill, of which as a journalist, as the chairman board of editors of Verbatim magazine, one of the most prominent investigative magazines in Nigeria, I've been able to delve into this matter from the time when it came on board. It has been a matter that has been lingering for about 2 years or more ago, and therefore, or more than that, and therefore I've been able to patiently look at the issue dispassionately. And I've arrived at the conclusion that based on investigations, Mr. Chamberlain, the issue has been propped up by some people that maybe do not like the face of the MD, Mr. Aliu Abati Abdul Hamid. This is somebody that I can say I've known for the past 40 years or thereabout. And he's also somebody that I can vouch for his integrity, his decency, his morality, and also a background of transparency, honesty, probity, and accountability.
You know, we're trying to look at processes, institutions, how things work to ensure that agencies of government function as they ought to, irrespective of who is there, no matter whose ox is God. But in this particular case, for instance, if you check several other places, there are several scenarios. The government, there's been investigation. Government looked into certain matters. Government, because it's not just him now, because I was going to say you're vying for 14 other persons who petition were written against. Why single out only him? And then government sacked him at some point. So those agencies, they are saddled with such responsibility to ensure that things are done. So assuming without conceding that social media persons may use that platform to prop up certain things, how then do you relate with those other agencies that investigated it and then his outward sack by the government?
You see, one problem that is associated with this government is that if you look at the president, when he came on board, he had 3 fundamental issues at stake that he had wanted to fight. One is the issue of fighting corruption. So if there's any figure that comes his way, if somebody with even ulterior motives are able to come to say that, look, Mr. President, see these figures, especially based on this fictitious petition. When this petition came on board, about 4 or 5 agencies, including EFCC, DSS, the police, NFIU, and ICPC, have all delved into the investigation process of this same particular issue. But then, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Federation, Mr. Malami, looking at the issues of duplication of this investigation process and also not to spend unnecessary resources on one investigation about 4 or 5, harmonized, the investigative process and left it in the hands of the police. He said, look, the police should investigate. He sent a letter to the IG of police to make sure that this thing is thoroughly investigated so that the others could just hands off and allow the process to be done by the police so as to minimize cost and also waste of resources. So having done that, the IG sent the former DIG, Ibrahim Lamordi, who was also the former EFCC chairman. In terms of forensic investigation in this country, Ibrahim Lamordi falls within the bracket of the gifted when it comes to investigative policing. So it was Ibrahim Lamordi that went and delved into these issues one after the other. And based on the Freedom of Information Bill that I've had, I've been able to get a copy of the submissions of Mr. Lamordi to the government. And in that submission, virtually almost all the points have been looked at dispassionately, one point after the other, and it has arrived at the conclusion that most of these things were just frivolous. They were...
So now, don't you think there's something missing? If all of these people are righteous, as perhaps you think, why is it then that government, who has all this information, these agencies report to, submit all their reports to, why haven't they been reinstated?
No, for now, you see, why I'm so pained, why my heart bleeds, is that for now, Aliu Abati Abdurrahim seems to be the only one that has been focused as a point of persecution.
No, but there's Mr. Idris Aweda, Mr. Olusegun Stephen,
yes, all this,
Mojid Raji, Etim Omobude, you know, several, Idris, Abdullahi, Ibrahim Abdullah, several others.
From the investigation I've had, Mr. Chamberlain will agree with me that all of them are in their offices. It was only Abdurrahim that has been able to, that was eased out.
Remember
for
the investigation. There are questions as to NIRSAL microfinance.
Yes.
The COVID funds. There's just so many questions that you wonder, why does society run this way?
You see, Mr. Chamberlain, there's a problem. A lot of people do not know the workings of these two organizations. You know, there are two organizations. There's NIRSAL PLC, Public Liability Company, and also there's NIRSAL Microfinance Bank. These are two different entities. Okay. The NIRSAL PLC, it is strictly based on securing risk, sharing risk, and also assisting. It doesn't disburse funds. It doesn't collect funds from the federal government.
But you know that there are questions as to the disbursement, the management of all of those funds, the allegations that there's fraud involved in all of those cases.
No, the management rests with the NIRSAL Microfinance Bank, which is not under the purview of
our colleagues in
Abdurrahim.
Go ahead.
Mr. Modibo, you said you've known him for 40 years. So why should we take your word for it about your claimed integrity of Mr. Abati?
I didn't hear the first leg of the question. I didn't hear, sorry.
If you can you confirm that you can hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yes, you said you've known Mr. Abati for 40 years. So I believe your relationship goes beyond that of being an acquaintance, you know, to something closer than we know. You know him on a personal level, I believe. 40 years is not a joke. So why should we take your word for it? Is your neutrality guaranteed here on your claimed integrity of Mr. Abati?
You know, I knew him as a young man who is highly educated, coming from a very sound background based on the antecedents of his progeny. You see, for these 40 years, I've never met him one-on-one. Honestly, since that time when we were in Mubi, I've not met him up to this moment that I'm talking to you. But based on my research, based on my findings as an investigative journalist, I've been able to discover that people have had misconceptions based on the erroneous impression created by some people who do not like his face. Most of the people that have been associated in this petition are in their offices. Only him that has been eased out. So I'm sure he must have maybe stepped on toes. And most of these allegations, if you've seen, they are allegations that are look very spurious, very suspicious, and they are allegations that are watery. As far as I'm concerned, somebody writing a petition calling on somebody that he married a South African wife. Is that not ridiculous? You see somebody talking about him buying houses in here and there, that he was an ex-convict in Yola, which is not true. Based on these verifiable facts from Ibrahim Lamorde's report to the IGP, and which a copy has been made to me, I've been able to find out that all these things are spurious allegations that have no basis, they have no foundation. It was just somebody that doesn't like his face and wanted to ease him out. If not, why is it there is only him that has been singled out for persecution? He has been eased out, he has been suspended, and that he has not been found wanting. Is there any court of law that has found him wanting of corruption? And after all, even the capital base of NIRSAL PLC does not amount up to 150 billion. The total capital base is even twice. If you multiply the capital base twice, it will form maybe approximately to 150. So where do they find all these things where there's nothing? You can't build a foundation based on empty platform. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not talking to you this morning based on my own contact with him, or maybe based on familiarity, but as a principled and a journalist that has been in investigative processes for almost about 36, 37 years post-graduation as a journalist in this country. So I think I stand a high ground as the editor, board editor of my magazine, to tell you that what I've been able to find is the fact and nothing but the truth.
Okay, so what's your explanation? What's your explanation for questions around the mismanagement of COVID funds, around the mismanagement of agric funds, if indeed, as you have noted, the mandate of NIRSAL is not to keep those funds? The funds are held in the CBN, by the CBN, which is the regulating authority over NIRSAL.
Yes, the NIRSAL PLC is under the purview of the CBN, and most of the asset base are also within the confines of the CBN. NIRSAL PLC has not in any way been associated with disbursements. Under no circumstance has it been. It has never been in contact with the issue of COVID-19. There is NIRSAL Microfinance Bank, and that Microfinance Bank is the one that is supposed to be making all this disbursement. The only thing that NIRSAL PLC does is to guarantee. That is why it is called Nigeria Incentive-Based Risk-Sharing System for Agricultural Lending. It is only there to give cover, to guarantee to people that are likely to have risks. And therefore, it has nothing to do with disbursements. It has nothing to do with lending processes. And it has nothing to do with all this. So I think it's based on figment of imagination of people that do not like this young man to be in office. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm telling you, from the viewpoint of my investigation, I found out that most of these people, most of even the petitioners, are fictitious petitioners. Some of them, their office cannot be verifiable. Some of their telephone numbers cannot be verifiable. Some of their even houses cannot be verifiable. Some are living in, like number 43 in Ghana Street, is found to be a food vendor palace called Food Portion. So there is no thing to hold on to tell the world that this person has stolen anything or this person has been dubious or he has been able to manage any resources. Because NIRSAL PLC is different from NIRSAL, this microfinance bank. And that is why people do not know. There's differences. And all these are divided into two sections manned by two different people. Where Mr. Abati holds sway is NIRSAL PLC. And it is just to guarantee risk-sharing scheme for agricultural lending, which has to do with taking care of farmers.
Just a second.
Yes, I'm listening, yes. Are
you saying that there are no corruption allegations at all?
I can tell you, if you're able to lay your hands on the report, which I have, and based on the findings, except if there's anything new that's been able to come up yesterday or today. But as far as I'm concerned, based on what I've been able to research, based on my own findings, I have not seen any iota of corruption. What needs to be done now is maybe to apologize to this young man and take him back to his office.
Okay.
Because
if you say there are no, just one second, Mr. Modibo, my apologies.
It's not like a sword of Damocles that you can hang onto a neck.
Just a second.
To say that, look, this man has stolen anything.
If you say there are no allegations, no proof of any corruption, how come the federal government of Nigeria didn't have the information that you have? Ministries, departments, agencies investigated, because I mean, I know you would agree with me that it's not a small thing for the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria or anyone at that to just remove an officer out of office just at the whim of and caprice of any thought. So I'm wondering, if you say that there are no allegations and this action has been taken, do you think he should prosecute?
Zooming without necessarily conceding to some of these allegations and fundamental flaws arising therefrom, Mr. IU agree with me that the federal government should have done due diligence in terms of investigation. If they found Abati wanting, why did they prosecute him? But up to this point, he has not been prosecuted. There's nothing to hang on to.
You know,
and secondly,
if that's
all
true,
these people that have
just
had
one
their
second,
names
Mr. Modibo.
I'm coming, Mr. Let me land. Please.
Okay.
All these people that have been, all these people whose names appear in the petition, where are they? Are they not in their offices today? Why have they not been sacked? So I'm telling you that Mr. Abati might have even stepped on some toes that don't like his face, and therefore they could use any means. You know, a drowning man could even hold a snake if he wants to get out of being drowned. And therefore, to me, as far as I'm concerned, there is nothing to hang on to, except if there's any allegation that has been able to come up between yesterday and
now, there's something you said earlier. Just a second,
based on the things
there's something you said earlier. You said that NIRSAL PLC is supposed to guarantee the loans given out by NMFB. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If that is the case, you know, of course, just a second. If that's NIRSAL Microfinance Bank, the bank. Now, if you say that it is the job of a NIRSAL PLC to guarantee loans given out by the microfinance bank, NIRSAL Microfinance Bank, you also are aware, of course, that there are corruption cases in NIRSAL Microfinance Bank. Isn't there a correlation somewhere?
But you see, hanging it onto, if there's corruption in NIRSAL Microfinance Bank, why should you be hanging on to the neck of Mr. Bati?
But that is the, you just said it yourself, Mr. Modibo, you just said it yourself. Just a second. You just said it yourself that it is the job of NIRSAL PLC to guarantee the loans given out by the microfinance bank, the NIRSAL Microfinance Bank. So who takes responsibility, if not NIRSAL PLC?
You see, the responsibility of the guarantor, he is guaranteeing risk sharing in terms of agricultural lending. That's just a guarantor. But it's a different thing altogether from somebody that is disbursing the loans. He has nothing to do with disbursement. He has nothing to do with funding. He does, look, in fact, it's not only the microfinance bank. The NIRSAL PLC guarantees for small and medium scale enterprises. It does also for agricultural business enterprises and also for individuals. If need be, they can stand as a guarantor to you in risk sharing. And therefore, I don't see anything that you can hang on to this man as saying that he has been able to steal anything. If he has, take him to court. And in Nigeria, you cannot prosecute anybody without a valid court order. If anybody has done anything, you cannot say that this person is corrupt, except if he has been tried and found wanting by the court of law. And in this circumstance, this man has not been found wanting. And most of these allegations that has been centered, that has been profiled against him, they are just spurious allegations based on self-centeredness, based on misinformation, and also based on lack of knowledge of journalism. Why you use the social media as a crisis point of trying to hang a dog when you don't like his face.
Well, you know, I mean, just last week, this is coming up because the Senate ad hoc committee investigating alleged uneven disbursement of loans, grants, and interventions in the 6 geopolitical zones by NIRSAL Microfinance Bank. They did urge the Central Bank of Nigeria to, to write off this trapped 180 billion naira loan granted Nigerians as a result of this coronavirus COVID pandemic. So several scenarios just playing itself out. So we're keeping tabs on how the Senate proceeds with this one, which is just several issues in that sector. But thank you for coming on this morning, Ibrahim Modibo, for your time today.
Thank you.
So let's take a look at some comments coming through from you. This Agom Tor says about NFIU. I totally agree with NFIU to suspend cash transactions in government accounts because government officer shouldn't be withdrawing money as they want without accounting for it.
Take a look at this one from Onoja. He's also talking about the NFIU guidelines. In any society where corruption is pervasive, all institutions are weakened. The police, which is the first line of defense in the enforcement of the law and order, is unable to operate without law and order being broken, which helps to fuel corruption for personal gains.
Nduka Zuigbo says about the same issue. I've said it before and I will continue to say it, that the office of the governor constitutes greatly to the slow pace of development in this country and not the federal. Until the powers vested on that office are reduced, most of the strides to development will not be achieved. In reality, there is no independence of any institution at state level due to the governor's powers.
Take this one more here from Olagunju. He says, there are challenges and advantages to cashless policy. However, The advantage is more of a long-term benefit that will improve monetary value. It tracks and regulates the flow of electronic money easily than physical cash, increase security, and reduces crime, he says. Well, there you go. That is the show today. We do thank you all for your time and your messages. We will see you again next time. I'm Chamberlain, so have a very good weekend.
Indeed, have a beautiful weekend ahead and make it count. I am Bukola Samuel Webimo.
Well, first work week gone in the year, 360, whatever, 51 weeks to go. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day and a weekend.